The Galactic Council had very specific rules about the Krivathi young. No exceptions, no negotiations, no compromises. Predator species juveniles were to be housed in reinforced containment units during transit, separated from prey species by no less than 3 sealed bulkheads. The regulation had been written in blood, or rather, in the luminescent ichor of a Peluvian diplomat who'd made the mistake of cooing at what he thought was a cute little carnivore 40 cycles ago. Serena Voss had read the regulations. She'd signed the compliance forms. She'd even sat through the mandatory 3-hour safety briefing about the dangers of misunderstanding predator body language. Then she'd watched the Krivathi cubs being herded into what amounted to a cargo hold, and every one of those regulations had dissolved like sugar in rain. The transport ship Harmonious Accord had been 3 days into its journey when the malfunction occurred. The environmental systems in Bay 7 had failed nothing catastrophic, just enough to make the temperature drop to levels that would leave the cold-blooded Krivathi sluggish and potentially hypothermic. The adult Krivathi could weather it with discomfort. The cubs, with their underdeveloped thermal regulation, could not. The ship's captain, a chitinous Vexlar named Kirktick, had been adamant. Regulations are clear. The young ones remain contained. We've already diverted to the nearest station. They will survive 6 more hours. 6 hours in temperatures that could damage their neural development, Serena had countered, standing in the corridor outside Bay 7, arms crossed. The translator implant behind her ear rendered her words into the clicking harmony of Vexazlar speech, though it couldn't quite capture her indignation. Better than 6 seconds near prey species who might panic and get hurt, Kirchtick had replied. Have you seen their claws? Their teeth? At this age, they cannot fully control their hunting reflexes. Serena had seen them. She'd seen the 6 cubs, each roughly the size of a large dog, covered in midnight blue scales that shimmered like oil on water, with eyes that glowed amber in the dim light. She'd seen their retractable claws, their double rows of serrated teeth, the ridge of spines along their backs. She'd also seen them huddled together, shivering, making small, distressed sounds that their adult guardians answered with low, rumbling growls of helplessness. My quarters have independent environmental controls, Serena had said, and I'm volunteering. The arguments that followed had been loud enough to wake the Peluvian ambassador 2 decks away. The safety officer had cited 14 separate regulations. The Krivathi adult guardian, Korsha, had refused outright, insisting it was too dangerous. Even the cubs' own people didn't trust them near soft prey. But Serena had learned something during her 2 years as a human cultural liaison. Most species in the galaxy had evolved in balanced ecosystems, where predator and prey had coexisted for millions of years, developing instinctive responses to each other. Earth was different. Earth's dominant predators had been humanity's competitors, not its hunters. Humans had climbed to the top through stubbornness, tool use, and the insane ability to just keep going. Fear of predators? Sure, humans had that, but humans also had dogs. 6 hours. Serena had said flatly. Then we reach the station, and they go wherever you want. But they're not freezing on my watch. Korsha had stared at her with those luminous amber eyes for a long moment. Then, slowly, the adult Krivathi had bowed her head, a gesture that looked almost like defeat but translated to respect in their species. Now, in the warmth of Serena's quarters, 6 Krivathi cubs explored their temporary sanctuary with the cautious wonder of children in a new place. They moved with surprising grace, their claws making soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. One investigated her bookshelf. Another examined her collection of earth plants with delicate sniffs. Cub Talron had made his intentions clear immediately. While his siblings explored, he'd walked directly to Serena's bed, looked up at her with those burning amber eyes, and chirped a sound that her translator didn't bother to interpret because no translation was needed. No, Serena had said. Absolutely not. You have perfectly good heated blankets over there. Talron had chirped again, more insistently. Your mother will have my head. A third chirp, and then the cub had simply laid down beside the bed, close enough that his tail curled around one of the legs. The message was clear. If he couldn't be on the bed, he'd be as close as physics allowed. Serena had sighed, sat down on the edge of her bed, and found herself automatically reaching down to scratch behind his auditory ridge, the Cravathi equivalent of ears. Talren's entire body had rumbled with a purr that sounded like distant thunder. The other cubs had noticed. Within minutes, all 6 had abandoned their explorations and formed a loose circle around Serena's bed. Not threatening, not hunting, just seeking warmth and the comfort of a presence that, for reasons their young minds couldn't articulate, felt safe. Korsha had checked on them once per hour, each time expecting to find carnage, or at least chaos. Instead, she'd found Serena sitting cross-legged on her bed, reading from a datapad while 6 juvenile predators dozed around her. Talren had eventually made it onto the bed itself, his head resting on Serena's lap, small snores punctuating the quiet. "I don't understand," Korsha had whispered on the 4th visit, her translator barely audible. "They should be agitated, stressed. You smell like prey, like food." Serena had looked up from her reading, her hand still absently stroking Talren's scales. "I also smell like I'm not afraid of them. And I think they can tell the difference. But our young are dangerous. Their instincts are to seek protection and warmth, just like any young creature." Serena had interrupted gently. "Yes. They're predators. So were wolves. Once. Humans have a pretty good track record with making friends out of things that could eat us." When the Harmonious Accord finally docked at the station, it took nearly 30 minutes to convince Talren to leave Serena's quarters. He'd clung to her, chirping in protest, until Serena had knelt down and pressed her forehead to his, a human gesture that somehow needed no translation. "You'll be fine," she'd whispered. "Go with your mom." Talren had finally relented, following Korsha down the corridor, but looking back every few steps. The incident report was filed, the regulations were reviewed, no changes were made to the official policies. But 3 weeks later, Serena received a message from Korsha. It contained a single image. Talren, now back home on the Cravathi world, sleeping peacefully, and clutched in his claws was a small, worn piece of fabric, a corner of the blanket from Serena's bed that he'd apparently torn off when no one was looking. Some instincts, Serena thought with a smile, were stronger than regulations.